Point Nemo is the most remote place on Earth, where space agencies have been dumping old satellites and spacecraft since the 70s. Mexico's Zone of Silence is a desert area where radios, compasses, and GPS often stop working. In Germany and Austria, tiny medieval tunnels called Erdstalls twist underground, possibly used for secret rituals or hidden meetings. These are mysterious places on Earth hiding more secrets than Area 51. Point Nemo is known as the most remote place on Earth. It's over 2,600 kilometers away from the nearest piece of land, stuck right in the middle of the South Pacific. Because it's so far from anything, it's become the perfect place for space agencies to crash decommissioned spacecraft. Starting in the 70s, agencies like NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, and JAXA have intentionally aimed old satellites, cargo ships, and entire space stations to fall there. About 260 pieces of space hardware has been dumped in this spot, including the massive Soviet Mir station. The International Space Station is actually scheduled to crash here too, sometime around 2031. This place is often called the Spacecraft Cemetery or Space Graveyard, which is pretty apt names. It's literally exactly what it is. And here's something kind of crazy to think about. Point Nemo is so far from civilization that when debris is falling, the people closest to the crash zone are usually astronauts in the International Space Station flying overhead. Even marine life is almost non-existent here because it's so far from anything. So sure, Area 51 hides secret planes, probably aliens, but Point Nemo is far more isolated. There's a strange patch of desert in northern Mexico called the Zone of Silence. It's a 31-mile wide area in the Chihuahuan Desert where radios, compasses, and GPS devices are said to stop working. The weird reputation really took off in 1970 when a US Athena rocket test went wildly off course and crashed here. The US sent out a full recovery team, and the German aerospace engineer Werner von Braun himself showed up to inspect the site. Since then, the area's been rumored to be this kind of hot spot for strange activity. There are weird lights in the sky, and on the extreme end of things, there are also stories of these tall, blonde humanoids walking around out there. One investigator even said people often get lost in the zone. When this happens, sometimes tall, blonde beings appear out of nowhere. Scientists have found that the area has an unusually high amount of magnetite and small meteorite fragments, which might explain why people's equipment acts up. But while it's a popular story that radios and compasses stop working, scientists who've studied the zone say those glitches haven't been consistently proven. All the same though, Zone of Silence is still one of the strangest places in the US. All across parts of Germany and Austria, people have been finding these tiny underground tunnels called Erdstalls. They're usually only about 3 to 4 feet high, so you can't even stand up in them. They twist and turn underground sometimes for over 160 feet, and they were dug out hundreds of years ago, probably sometime between 11 and 1300, but nobody knows why they were built. There's not much inside, they're just empty tunnels. Some people think they were used for storage or escape routes, but there are sections of the tunnels that are super narrow in places. You have to crawl through on your stomach, which doesn't sound very practical for hauling supplies. This makes some people believe they were used for rituals or ceremonies, or people went underground as part of some sort of initiation, maybe representing death and rebirth. It could also have been used by secret societies back in medieval times. The hidden entrances and the confusing layout could help people move around without being seen during secret meetings and ceremonies. Over 700 of these tunnels have been found across Europe, and they don't seem to be tied to any one town or religion. Similar to the Erdstalls scattered across Cornwall, usually under farmland, you'll also find tunnels from the Iron Age, built about 2,000 years ago, called Fogou Tunnels. Nobody really knows why they exist. They're long, narrow, and made from huge slabs of stone, twisting around underground, sometimes for tens of meters. Archaeologists have found almost no tools or artifacts inside, which is kind of weird for something so carefully built. They could have been hideouts during raids. Makes sense, they're tight, hard to get into. It's also possible they were storage rooms, could definitely be handy on a farm, or maybe they were, again, ritual sites, places to tell stories. The tunnels create these eerie echoes. Bring a couple candles down there at night, got a pretty ideal place for a ghost story. Deep under the Nica mine in Mexico, there's a brutal, dangerous place called the Cave of Crystals. It's packed with giant crystals. Some of them are over 30 feet long and weigh more than 50 tons. The cave was discovered by accident in 2000 when miners were drilling and broke through the rock. It's not a place people can easily explore though. The heat inside can hit 136 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity so high that just breathing becomes dangerous. Without a special suit and oxygen, you'd pass out in minutes. Scientists think the crystals got this big because the cave was once flooded with hot, mineral-rich water that stayed trapped underground for at least 500,000 years, giving the crystals time to grow to these insane sizes. One of the strangest discoveries is that some of the crystals have small pockets of water inside that might hold ancient microbes, possibly trapped for up to 50,000 years. At Judge C.R. Magny State Park, the Brule River splits just before a waterfall. One side flows over the falls normally, but the other side plunges straight into a deep pothole called Devil's Kettle, and then vanishes. People have thrown all kinds of stuff in there, sticks, ping pong balls, and GPS trackers, hoping to find where the water comes out. Nothing ever shows up downstream. In 2017, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources finally tested the flow and found the river's volume below the falls matches what's coming in, so the water isn't underground in some secret cave far away, probably loops back underground close by, but how it moves without popping back up is still a mystery. The pothole's current might trap debris before it can escape, which is why nothing surfaces. So yeah, it's not a black hole or anything, but the place still messes with your head. Off the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, there's this ruined city called Nan Madol, built right on top of a coral reef. It's made up of about 100 small artificial islands connected by a network of canals, which is why people sometimes call it the Venice of the Pacific. Everything's built from huge basalt stones. Some of them weigh up to 50 tons. No one really knows how people in the area moved and stacked them without cranes, wheels, or metal tools. Archaeologists say Nan Madol was probably built around 800 years ago, but the deeper you dig, the more complicated it gets. There's very little written history about the place, and a lot of what we do know comes from oral legend. Some say the stones were flown into place by magical birds. Others believe the city was once connected to a now lost continent or was built by giants. Even today, some people in Pohnpei think the place is cursed, and they avoid going there after dark. Mount Lico is this huge, steep mountain in Mozambique with steep cliffs that completely cut it off from the surrounding land. The top is covered in rainforest, but nobody had ever set foot in it until 2012, at least no documented cases. People had been up there a very, very long time ago, but not permanently. So for who knows how long, this forest sat pretty much unexplored, like a little lost world sitting on a mountain. Locals living nearby knew about the mountain, but didn't climb it because the cliffs were pretty much impossible to scale without proper gear. So when scientists finally got up there, they found some pretty amazing stuff. It was a rainforest that had grown in total isolation. The plants and animals up there had been living with almost zero human interference. They found unique frogs, rare butterflies, and plants that might not exist anywhere else on the planet. But there were pots and old tools buried under the soil. No evidence anyone ever lived up there full time though. It's still not totally clear how those artifacts got there. This is one of the most isolated forests in the world. Jatinga is a tiny village in India, and every year between September and November, something really weird happens. At night, tons of migrating birds suddenly start diving straight into trees, buildings, and just the ground. It almost seems like they're doing it on purpose. As for why, no one really knows. One possibility is that the birds get confused by the village lights. The artificial glow throws off their navigation and they just crash into stuff. The fog and wind around that time probably doesn't help either. Some scientists think there might be some magnetic weirdness in the area messing with the birds' internal compasses. And then there's the folklore. Original Naga tribe who lived there thought that these were evil spirits attacking, which scared them enough to leave leave the village. Deep under Antarctica's ice is Lake Vostok, one of the largest and most mysterious subglacial lakes on Earth. It's buried beneath about 2.5 miles of ice, and it's been sealed off from the surface for at least 15 million years. That's a lot of years. Scientists only found it existed through satellite radar and ice-penetrating technology, since you can't just drill down without risking contaminating everything. The lake is huge, bigger than Lake Ontario, but it's been isolated for so long it might be home to life forms totally new to science. In 2012, Russian scientists finally drilled through the ice and reached the lake water, taking samples that have been studied ever since. I've been your host, James, and I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.